How do you sort out the so-called jargon from real-world practices that work? Do the members of your organization find some business or technology advice utterly confusing? Welcome to Real Talk with Sam Holcman. In this program, we set the record straight, and in terms that business people and technology people can understand. Now, here is your host, Sam Holcman.
Welcome to this edition of Real Talk. Let me begin with something that's pretty obvious. One of the great things about the internet is anybody can write anything about anything. One of the problems with the internet is anybody can write anything about anything. And this particular broadcast is about enterprise architecture or business architecture, advice, and advisors. How can you determine how to best spend your time and money? It's kind of a very important question nowadays. The amount of things that we see out there on the internet, books being published, right and left, and self-declared experts. And yes, there's experts out there, don't get me wrong. But possibly a little sage advice from someone with a bit of gray hair is important at this particular point. So when you're evaluating enterprise architecture or business architecture advice, focus on whether the person, the book, the website, or the post can demonstrate real decisions changed, risks reduced, or value created, not just fluency in frameworks and jargon. The most dependable advisors and materials walk through concrete situations, artifacts, and outcomes, and openly acknowledge what they've learned. Remember that the time you spend consuming advice is often more valuable than the money you spend on it. Some core credibility criteria you may want to use. Before taking EA or BA advice seriously, test whether the person, or once again the book or the website or the post, actually practices architecture that delivers outcomes rather than theory alone or just talks about it. Demonstrated practice is what you're asking about. Ask whether the EA/BA deliverables have produced goal-aligned initiatives, developed business capabilities, models, roadmaps, decision models, investment cases, or something like that, and what measurable outcomes those have enabled. Cost reduction, risk mitigation, goal alignment, goal achievement, revenue growth, compliance, etc. Strategy alignment. Ask how the anchor architecture in business strategy instead of optimization of IT actually occurred. And for examples where the work directly supported strategic goals or transformations. Ask about change and delivery impact. Ask how their work influenced projects, funding, and implementation roadmaps, and how they measure success beyond we created models. Something about experience and track record. Advice quality depends on depth and relevance of experience across organizations and change efforts. The depth of the role. Ask how the EA or BA roles that they have held at what scope, enterprise, business unit, or product line, actually occurred and for how long. Comparable situations. Ask for examples from environments similar to yours, regulated versus unregulated, public versus private, startup versus large enterprise, etc., and what from those situations actually transfers to you. Evidence of outcomes. Ask for case-style stories that link problems or opportunities to architectural approaches to measurable results. Yes, even if client names are not available, and listen for specifics instead of vague success claims. Methodologies and frameworks, of course. Strong advisors use frameworks as a structure. A framework is not a doing tool. A framework is a thinking tool, not dogma either. It's an approach, not just labels. Ask them to walk step by step through how they would tackle a specific problem or opportunity you face, from stakeholder engagement through decisions and follow through. How do they produce version 1? Not over-engineering. Ask how they decide what version 1 actually is of the architecture, models and documentation, what they should be, and how they avoid shelfware and years of mapping before changes actually happen. Integration across domains. Ask how they connect business architecture, like business developed capabilities, initiatives, operating models, organization models, with technology, data, and change portfolios, instead of treating them as separate silos. And of course, this goes for enterprise architecture too. Make sure that we're talking business orientation and business communication. In EA and BA, collaborating effectively with executives or managers matter as much as technical modeling skills. Stakeholder fluency. Ask how they work with non-technical executives, what questions they use to surface real needs, and how they resolve conflicting priorities. Talk about storytelling and visualization. Ask for examples where they turn complex architecture into clear narratives and visuals that directly shape decisions, such as executive briefings or stakeholder focus understandings. Value framing. Ask how they quantify or otherwise express value, cost, risk, agility, customer impact, and what key performance indicators, KPIs, they track for architecture. Ask about mentoring and coaching fit. For ongoing coaching, mentorship, or training, you need both credibility and developmental fit. Your goals versus someone's strengths. State goals such as build a BA practice, transition into EA, or govern AI initiatives, and ask which they are the strongest at and which is not their focus. Learning style and cadence. Ask how they structure guidance, formal sessions, working side by side on real problems, reviews of your work, etc., and how often they expect to interact. Evidence of developing others. Ask how they have developed other architectures, how they had them grow from role definition and skills development through promotions or practice building, not just their own achievements. Now, some key advisors or advice red flags. Some consistent pattern should make you skeptical of EA and BA advice, whether it's written or an individual, no matter how confident it sounds. First and foremost, framework worship. What to watch out for? Buzzword-heavy discussions of frameworks, but no clear link to outcomes or trade-offs. Model-first obsession. What do you watch out for there? Push for large generic maps and repositories with little interest in pilots or quick wins. Final pattern to watch out for red flags. One size fits all. Claims that there is a single right way to do EA and BA regardless of your context. Additional red flags behavior include talking mainly about a specific framework, capability maps, internet popular approaches and repositories without explaining who used them and what decisions they changed, or presenting success in vague terms like alignment without timeframes, metrics, or stakeholder names. Some summary questions you can ask. These questions work well in interviews or early conversations. Tell me about a time your architecture work changed an executive decision or major initiative. What did you do? And what changed as a result? If you were helping us, what would be the first small but meaningful demonstration project you'd tackle, and why? How did you keep architecture connected to strategy and value, rather than letting it become an IT documentation exercise? What kinds of organizations and problems are you, frankly, not a good fit for, and why? Using these questions criteria help filter for advisors who practice outcome-driven enterprise architecture and business architecture and avoids those whose guidance keeps you busy without improving decisions, changes, or results. Lately, one of the cautions for all of us are public information-only advisors. A public information-only advisor mostly recites what can be found online, while an experienced advisor can walk through situations, decisions, and outcomes they personally shaped. We all know that best practices are not on the internet. The internet only has published practices that anyone can copy and regurgitate. Some of these advisors are certification first and outcome later. Theory-only advisors lean on certifications and popular named methods, yet struggle to point out concrete projects where their work changed a decision, a business roadmap, or a result. They provide generic, easily searchable answers. Their explanations stay at high-level definitions and published practice lists with little reference to your context, constraints, or trade-offs. They have a model and jargon obsession. They talk about framework, capability maps, and reference architectures, but cannot explain who used them and what business problem they actually solved. Now, how do experienced advisors behave? Practitioners with bona fide experience talk and act very differently. They are story-driven, not buzzword-driven. When you ask for advice, they answer with specific stories about organizations' roles, stakeholders, models, outcomes, even if not identified by a specific client. We all understand those confidentialities. There's a clear link from strategy to change. They show how architecture informed portfolio choices or funding decisions or decommissioning or operating model shifts, not just they produced deliverables. They're comfortable with ambiguity and trade-offs. They ask clarifying questions, service risks and options, and explain why some textbook patterns just don't fit reality in certain situations. Direct tests that you can use. These questions quickly reveal whether you are speaking to a copier, a reader, or a doer. Describe a specific time your architecture work changed an executive decision or major initiative. What did you do and what changed? Generalities signal theory only. Dates, roles, and stakeholder metrics suggest real practice. Show me one or two examples of your EA or BA deliverables and explain how they were used. Talking only about templates suggests theory. Explaining how people used artifacts and what happened next suggests practice. What went wrong in a past EAB effort that you participated in, and what did you do differently the next time to avoid that pattern because of your experiences? Real practitioners usually have specific failure and learning stories. Theory-only people rarely do. Behavior and communication telltales for you. You can also infer depth of experience from how these people or articles or books communicate. Client language versus framework language. Experienced advisors adopt your language and industry terms. Theory-only people stay in framework jargon that requires constant translation. Makes complexity simple. Practitioners reduce complexity choices to simple business-relevant explanations, while less experienced advisors add complexity and buzzwords to sound knowledgeable. Those that add complexity to architecture should be dismissed with no additional thought. Architecture should be the simplification of something that is complex. And focus on demonstration projects. Real advisors quickly try to anchor the conversation on one concrete problem or pilot they can help move, rather than proposing a big bang architecture exercise. Finally, a practical rule of thumb. Treat EA and BA advisors the way you would treat a surgeon. Certifications and publications matter, but without a visible trail of real operations, decisions, and outcomes, you are probably dealing with someone who knows the vocabulary, but not the work. Only theoretical experts leave consistent fingerprints. Please be careful. Those that are theoretical experts leave the following consistent fingerprint. They talk about frameworks, they talk about tools, they talk about models, but cannot show decisions changed, risk reduced, or money saved. Nor can they demonstrate artifacts still in use by specific roles or forums. Help us help you. Please contact us in enterprise or business architecture. We'll be happy to provide practitioner-based decades of response for your specific problems, for your specific opportunities in enterprise or business architecture. And it will be our pleasure to speak with you. We can be reached on our two websites, www.eacoe.org, Enterprise Architecture Center of Excellence, and www.bacoe.org, the Business Architecture Center of Excellence. Thanks for listening, and go do real impactful enterprise and business architecture to enable your business and enterprise strategy.
Thank you for tuning in to Real Talk. Be sure to join your host, Sam Holcman, again for another edition of our program. We'll have more real topics of discussion then.